One of the first marathons Alan and I ran together was the Toronto Waterfront Marathon. I thought it was in 2015, but Alan said
You could be right.
2016.
No, you
Yeah.
could be right.
The reason why we always kind of look back at this marathon was because at the time we thought our upper end of our ability would be about a 3:10 marathon. And so we had calculated that we had to run even 4:30 paces. And so we would just go out in 4:30 and see how long we could hold it. Well, we managed to still be holding it towards the end. And actually, just before this podcast, Alan told me that apparently at the end we passed a girl, and I told her, "You can run with us. We're gonna run under 3:10, and we want it bad." And I absolutely don't remember any of that or saying that at all. But
You
apparently I
definitely
said
did.
that.
You definitely did because it was very uncharacteristic Liz. It was sort of, woo, woo. She's gone all badass at the end of the marathon.
Yeah, even now I'm like saying this and I'm like, I don't know if that's something that I would say, but I guess I did because Alan heard it. So, although it's actually not our best marathon anymore, um, to this day we kind of reminisce about this one because it was just so perfectly paced. We went out, every K was very close to 4:30 per kilometer, which is exactly what we needed for 3:10. We figured we would just kind of like, find a little finishing sprint at the end. And we ended up just dipping under, but we had absolutely nothing left. So our finishing sprint was not much of a sprint. It felt like a sprint, but the actual pace was not really all that much faster than what we were doing. And we got to over the line and we were just completely we had given everything and we got our goal. But I guess the perfect part about it was that wasn't exactly that we got the goal. It was just the perfect pacing and getting to the line, being able to tell ourselves that we couldn't have done better than that. And so now for the last few years, what we've been trying to do is reenact that, but about 10 minutes faster. Although it hasn't been really working out for me at least. And maybe today's book is just going to help us along in that goal. We can learn how to perfectly pace, but just a little bit faster. So, hi, and welcome to Running Book Reviews Podcast, where we review books written for runners, about runners, and by runners to help you decide if you'd like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running or maybe inspire you to try something new. My name is Liz, and with my co-host Alan, we're talking to author Matt Fitzgerald about his book, How to Run the Perfect Race.
How to Run the Perfect Race is a book all about pacing. The book's divided into two main sections. Section one is several chapters all about, why is pacing good for you, how to do it, why it's so hard. Basically, all about how to master pacing. And then section two is a whole series of very interesting training plans for your next 5K, 10K, half marathon, or marathon, really based around setting paces measured on perceived effort. Pacing isn't about having an even pace on your Garmin. It's about having an even effort, which takes into account things like terrain and weather conditions on race day. Pacing may sound easy, but most people aren't very good at it. And we've tried it, and mostly we find on most days we're not that good at it. The pros often differentiate themselves by their immaculate ability to do pacing. In fact, Matt gives some examples in the book of professional athletes who can run a pace perfectly without their GPS watch. They just seem to know how it feels and they can just dial it in. Let me tell you a little bit about Matt. If you don't know Matt Fitzgerald, where have you been? Um, you're obviously a newbie to running. Welcome. Um, Matt Fitzgerald is an acclaimed endurance sports coach, nutritionist, author, and co-founder of 80/20 Endurance. His many books include, among his many books, this is like reading Monty Python's sketch on the Inquisition. Yeah. Matt Fitzgerald, his three books include no, his four books. No, among his many books. I don't know if you know the Monty Python sketch.
Yes, I
So,
do.
among his many books are included The Endurance Diet, 80/20 Running, How Bad You Want It, etc., etc. I mean, I could go on. I suspect you must be getting around 40 these days in terms of numbers of books.
Creeping toward that
Yeah.
number. Yeah.
Matt's writing also appears regularly in magazines and on websites, for example, Women's Running or OutsideOnline.com. His online training plans have helped thousands of athletes of all experience and ability levels achieve their goals. Certified by the International Society of Sports Nutrition, Matt has consulted for numerous sports nutrition companies, and he's the creator of the Diet Quality Score, DQS, smartphone app. Is there no end to this man's abilities? A lifelong athlete, he speaks frequently at events throughout the United States and internationally, and has been on many podcasts, including ours, about 3 or 4 times. I think you hold the record now, Matt, for appearances on our podcast. And I suspect you probably hold the record on a whole bunch of podcasts for the most frequent visitor. We really appreciate the time that you give to the community from that point of view. So welcome again, once again, Matt.
It's always great to be with you too.
It's like talking with an old friend.
Mm-hmm.
What can I say?
Yep.
So here we are with the book. The book's called How to Run the Perfect Race. Basically, it looks like it's a second edition of the book that we've already covered, On Pace.
Yep.
Is that right? So we know why you did On Pace, but why do this second version and what's different about it?
Yes. So it was kind of, this is, we're getting into how the sausage is made, but
Yeah.
On Pace was released by my own book publishing company that I co-founded with David Warden and Hannah Hunstadt, 2 colleagues from 80/20 Endurance. So we just decided we wanted our own book publishing imprint, put out On Pace, and then we were able to negotiate a distribution partnership with Simon and Schuster, which is a huge opportunity for us.
Cool.
We knew how to create good books. We did not have kind of the horsepower to distribute and sell books the way a behemoth like Simon and Schuster can. So that was a great opportunity, great win for us. But then we had to deliver, and as Simon and Schuster explained it to us, like you basically have to have at least one new book to publish in every season, and there are like 3 seasons in book publishing. Otherwise, the kind of the sales, their internal sales personnel, they will just forget about you. Like you need to keep in front of them. So like, they have their own internal sales reps that liaise with Barnes and Noble and Amazon and all that. So we had to deliver, and we're a very small operation. So we're like, okay, like how do we get to that point? Well, one way is to re-release or release a second edition of a book we'd already done. And I always would like to have a second crack at any book I do anyway. And so just went back to that manuscript with fresh eyes and just incorporated like feedback I'd gotten from readers, and also new science that had come out, more recent examples, and just finding better language to kind of explain these concepts, and also some new tools, because pacing skill development is a major focus in my coaching, and I'm always like finding new ways to help athletes get better at pacing. So I was able to incorporate some of that stuff into the book as well.
I mean, this is interesting about the distribution. So do you have any plans for the future in terms of are you going to try and get other authors that you publish through 80/20? Do you have anything?
Yeah, we're trying to be like a real publisher. The idea is not that it's Matt's, vanity press. So it is. I'm always working on something, so I can probably deliver at least one new book for us. But we have one that's about to come out called The Norwegian Method, and it's all about the explosion in elite endurance performers from Norway in triathlon, cycling, the winter sports, running. And the author of that one is a guy I used to work with at Triathlete Magazine named Brad Culp. It's his first book. Excuse me, but this is part of the fun of now actually being a publisher, is I can be a bit of a kingmaker. If there's like a great idea, but I'm not the person to execute on it, or if I just encounter someone who just has like a fresh new voice that really deserves to be amplified, and kind of fills a a gap in the public discourse around endurance sports, then I can create opportunities for these people. So yeah, we have some really cool books in the pipeline. Yeah, the Norwegian method. We were waiting for the Olympics just in case Norwegian athletes kicked butt.
Yeah.
They did.
Mhm.
So just inserted some of that stuff, and it will be released this fall.
Well, also, we've sort of started hearing about the Norwegian method just like through articles and things and magazines and people talking about it, like double threshold. And
Yep.
yeah, I'm not exactly sure what a double threshold workout is, but I've definitely heard the terms. So yeah, so it's out there, and it's great to have a book because now someone's going to do a deep dive, and then we could read all about it and learn everything there is to know to execute it
Should
properly.
definitely have Brad on your show.
Okay,
Yeah, well,
perfect.
if it's got running in it and it's a book, we're certainly interested to have a look.
Next those boxes. Yep.
I guess everyone's
Mhm.
going to come down from Flagstaff, come down out of altitude, and then go to the Arctic. That's going to be one aspect of the Norwegian method. Go to the Arctic to train.
Yeah, they come here. We had the Ingebrigtsens were in town here for a little while before the Olympics.
You're in Flagstaff, huh?
Flagstaff.
And you
That's
know,
right.
you
Yeah.
still-
Okay, so I guess before we get started with the more specific questions, I guess this might be a little bit of a refresh for people that listen to the podcast about On Pace, but can you kind of define pacing and why it's a skill that runners would want to have, especially in this age of GPS, and maybe go into like how GPS sort of helps us or doesn't help us?
Yeah, we got watches. We don't need to do pacing. We've got watches.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people think. I'll just
Right.
use my
Yep.
Garmin.
Yeah. A Garmin or a GPS or accelerometer can tell you what your current pace is with a high degree of accuracy. It actually can't pace you. That's something like your body doesn't move unless your brain commands it to. So your Garmin doesn't do that. And I define there's a scientific definition of pacing. My kind of lay definition of it is the art of finding your limit. That's obviously specific. You can pace in workouts and easy runs where you're not trying to find your limit. But if you are training for goals like running a sub 3 hour marathon, then you're an athlete, and the purpose of the training is to give you an opportunity to really run a perfect race or something close to it. So in that context, you are trying to find your limit, like the experience you had at the Toronto Waterfront Marathon, where you finished the race, look back at it. Was that the race, or was it another one?
Yeah,
Was
it was
it?
No,
that
it was.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, and you look back and say, you can look yourself in the mirror and say, there isn't really a single thing I could have done differently that would have allowed me to run that race any faster. There aren't a lot of skills at play in running. It's a simple sport. That's part of the attraction. But like you can't have that feeling of satisfaction at the end of a race without having executed the pacing beautifully. Just imagine if you had sprinted the first mile of that race, would you have dipped under 3:10? No. What if you had walked the first mile of the race? Would you have dipped under 3:10? No, those are extreme examples, but you can keep, making examples that are less and less extreme. And then you kind of realize, wow, you're really threading a needle, when you finish of all the possible times you could run a marathon in to cover that distance in the least time possible is an extremely precise thing. So it's the art of finding your limit. And then the question is like, well, what is your limit? Your limit in endurance sports, in distance running, is perceptual. Like, in a something like a sprint, 100-meter dash, 60-meter dash, or something like a maximal lift, like maximal bench press or maximal barbell squat. The limits for those are obviously physical. Like you are directly encountering hard physiological limits in something like a sprint or a 1-rep maximal lift. In running, it's different. If you're out there running a marathon and I pop in at 10 kilometers and say, could you run faster right now? The answer presumably would be, yes. If I popped in at 15K and said, could you run faster right now? The answer would be yes. Well, why aren't you? Because you're deliberately holding yourself back, right? You know that to achieve the goal of finishing a marathon or whatever race in the least time possible, you have to be deliberately running not as fast as you could be running, which is kind of a weird thing. But the idea is like, well, fatigue accumulates, and eventually that pace that is not as fast as you could run will be as fast as you can run when you get to that, within sight of the finish line. And then the question is, okay, well, how much do you hold back? Right. And that's where the
That's the
whole,
tough one.
that's where my Garmin can do it for me breaks down. Cause like your
Mm.
Garmin doesn't know how much you can collect a lot of data in something, like the Stride Power Pod, race prediction algorithm is really good. If you have well-rounded training, where you're training at a variety of intensities and you've got the Stride on, and you plug in the race you're going to do, it can give you a pretty good estimate. But you're a unique athlete in a unique situation in every race. So there isn't, and nor will there ever be, like a wearable or a calculator that can tell you, just like crystal ball style, you can run 309.52 today. Like that is fundamentally unknowable. And again, the limit is perceptual. Like, there's been a lot of interesting studies done where the assumption was, if you have someone run on a treadmill at a certain speed until they fall off the back of it because they can't continue, it's like the assumption was it is like a sprint. It is like a maximal one repetition lift. Like something's breaking. And all the King scientists could not find anything. Like we are not encountering hard physiological limits as endurance runners. Like, why can't we run faster? Because we feel we can't run faster. Your Garmin doesn't know how you feel. And so, just to tie a bow on this rant, number one, finishing a race in the least time possible is a very, very precise thing, very precise. And, to find that exact limit, the limiter is perceptual. So like you have to develop that internal GPS in order to be able to run a perfect race. Tools like, the Stride Pod and the GPS watch are, I would say they're borderline indispensable, but they cannot do it for you.
So you don't pull punches basically, because one of your chapters, I think it's chapter 3, is called "Why You Suck at Pacing," which is not far off the truth for most of the people who you're probably hemming the book at.
Well, I mean, like if we take our track record, like, well, mine at least, then I mean it works for me as well. Because, how many times have I failed that 3-hour goal? But like by, 10 minutes sometimes.
I guess you've explained the second part of my question, which was why would we want to get better? Well, we want to get better because we want to optimize the result, any result we can do on the day. If we're coming for our A goal, we want to try to optimize the result. Why do we all suck at pacing?
3 reasons. And so, yeah, I mean, that sounds like an insult, right? But I mean, that's really, that chapter title is based on how, the many, many, many runners I meet and encounter, that's how they describe themselves. That is their own perception. It's like,
it's true. No, it's true. We did some track, just an anecdote. We did some track a couple of months ago. And we've got a few people who are now kind of up at our speed, but they're quite a bit less experienced in terms of Liz and I are just doing reps on the track. And we think we suck at pacing. And I would lead, maybe Liz or I would lead a group, and we pace around at the requisite. And then we take a rest, and then we take another interval. And we say to one of the kind of more junior guys who are the same speed as us, okay, you take a turn at the front. And it's all over the place. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, I thought I sucked at pacing, but you really suck.
Yeah, so I think there are 3 reasons for that. One is like pacing is hard. Like it's just inherently difficult. The way you can drive home that point is just like go to your next local 5K race that has a 1K kids run, and where you have a lot of young children who are running their first quote unquote distance race. And what do they all do? Take off like bats out of hell. Just and humans are pretty much the only species that can pace, something that is long enough where you can't see the finish, where the distance to be covered is abstract. Like you have to be as intelligent as humans are to even to be able to do that. That's why, racehorses have jockeys on their backs. That's why, racing greyhounds are chasing a rabbit, because they're just not smart enough. So it's really hard, for the average runner. A marathon is a race of 55,000 steps. And what you're trying to do is hit a bullseye, like each and every one of those steps has to contribute to the goal of minimizing completion time. Inherently difficult. The second reason, so I started running in 1983, and there wasn't a lot of talk about pacing. It was just sort of like, yeah, you'll get better. And for the most part, people did. I think what's changed, and the reason like I wouldn't have needed to write this book in 1983. And I probably was writing books in 1983 when I was 11. But now, like, things have changed. Like, one is, yeah, we have all these devices and I see it every day. It's just like, it makes me want to tear my hair out. Like, I'm here at 7,000 feet of elevation, and I'll have, flatlanders come up to train here for a few weeks, and they're all like panicking. It's like, my Garmin says I'm dying, and it's like, your Garmin doesn't know
You're at altitude.
you're not at home.
Yeah.
Like, are you dying? Do you feel like you're dying? Well, my Garmin says I am. It's like, come on. But like, there's like this dependency that these devices are fostering. And so they really slow. We can get deeper into that if you want to, but like, when you start off, like, day one as a runner with like just, laden with technology, it actually slows down the process of being able to, calibrate that internal GPS. And then I think the third reason that, the average runner today sucks more than the average at pacing than the average runner in 1983 is that people are starting later. By the time I was 25, I had 14 years of running experience, and there's just no substitute for experience, just, putting the reps for developing pacing skill. Now it's more the norm that you have a 45-year-old runner who, started running at 35, but only started running seriously at 41, so they're middle age, but they're pretty new. As I said, they just don't have as many reps.
Yeah, you sort of, with the device dependency, you remind me of the meme that we've kind of all seen, where at the end it's, you go through your Garmin, all the data, and someone says, well, are you having fun? And they say, well, the Garmin doesn't tell me whether I'm having fun or not.
Yeah, I like that one. It's pretty funny. I share it like every time that I see it in my stories.
That's actually in the book. Yeah, that is a dumb runner.
Oh, that's probably where
that's probably where I
picked it up from.
Yeah.
There you go.
I've seen it on social media though, like more than once.
Yeah.
More than once. Yeah.
Classic.
I love that one.
Invariably, I mean, Liz and I have both coached, catch to 5K people, and we would say like the number one thing that they do wrong is they try to go too quick too soon. And almost 100% of people who start later in life and trying to go to their first 5K will say, well, actually, I'm not a runner. They've tried it for a week and they get exhausted all the time because they're pacing wrong for their ability.
Yeah, about the GPS, I just want to share like a funny thing that happened in the spring. So I ran a 10K in the spring, and I ran the 10K in like 40 minutes and some seconds. Like, so let's say it was 40, 30. And that day I went home, and Garmin always tells you about like your whatever, your VO2 max and your performance, and it's got these predictions on it. And even after just having run the 10K in 40, 30, my Garmin was telling me that my performance for 10K was like 44 minutes. So it wasn't even smart enough to detect that I just run 10K faster than what it was telling me I could run 10K in. So anyway, they're really not smart. So
there goes our Garmin sponsorship again. We were just starting to get good with Garmin after the rant we had about 6 weeks ago.
But like, I still love my Garmin, but just not for telling me how good I can be.
Right.
It gives me, makes me feel bad about myself. It's like I'm doing all this training. Oh, I'm getting slower.
We love you, Garmin. Send us some samples.
Okay, Alan, like you just distracted me. I was going to say something. Oh, I was going to talk about the end of our marathon where, we were going for a sprint and it felt like we were sprinting and we really weren't sprinting. In your book, you actually say that one of the indicators that your pacing, I guess your pacing was okay, is that at the end, your sprint is not really a sprint. So is that the only indicator, or are there others?
Yeah, you describe it as an underwhelming finishing kick,
yeah.
which I think is quite nice.
Yes. Yeah. It sounds exactly like what we did at the end
of that.
Marathon.
I love that. How's my finishing kick? Underwhelming.
Yeah.
It's good. Yeah. I think there are two hallmark characteristics. First of all, like, perfect execution of a race is kind of unknowable. I mean, where would you look to know for sure? It's fundamentally unknowable, but you know that you've gotten very, very close to perfect, if not perfect, if your race has two characteristics. One is steadiness, like a consistency, or a fairly even or very even distribution of effort. And on a flat race with no wind and not a lot of not too crowded, so you're not weaving in and out of people, like a very simple circumstances, like the Chicago Marathon in 2017 for me. Then it's going to be, you're talking about a steady pace. But if there are more variables at play, that's still more like a steady distribution of effort. The reason that is, kind of necessary to finishing a race in the least time possible is like two reasons. One is physiological. You would think like, well, it's the average that matters, right? And so, if my effort is just sort of undulating, going above the highest pace I can sustain, and then a little below it, and then above it again, and then a little below it, so it all evens out. Isn't that basically the same as just running, right at the fastest pace I can sustain? And the answer is no, because the relationship between intensity and the rate at which fatigue accumulates is not linear. So every time you go above the fastest sustainable velocity, you're burning matches much quicker, and you can't even that out. You can't get those matches back by slowing down below the highest average pace you can sustain. So it's just that non-linearity, especially around critical velocity, which is maybe the fastest pace you could sustain for around 30 minutes. So it's almost like at any given pace, like you can sustain it for a certain duration. And if you stray above the fastest pace you can sustain for the official race distance, you actually move the finish line closer to you. It's like, well, the official finish line didn't move, but your finish line is now 100 yards before that because you went
That's a problem.
Yeah. So that's one. And the other one is just more like, so that was like, physiology, biochemistry. And then the other one is physics. The most costly thing you can do as a runner, and energy wise, is accelerate. So the steadier pace, the less time you're spending accelerating. And if you're undulating in a longer race, it's like, well, but I mean, my pace was kind of steady. Still, that's a lot of accelerating, and it will add up over time. So that's why you want to have a pretty even distribution of effort. And there's lots of good research. Distance running is complex enough that it's never going to be like absolutely perfectly steady in a measurement like oxygen consumption or caloric expenditure. You can have like a rough patch in a longer race where it's actually just smart to slow down a little bit, gather yourself, and it's hard to account for that type of thing. But if you look at pacing patterns in real world races as they relate to outcomes, you just always see the steadiest performers finish fastest, always. Even in like very, very hilly ultras. It's like, all right, everyone's losing steam at the end, but guess who's losing steam less? The people who are finished close to the front. So that's one. But of course, if that were the only hallmark characteristic of a perfectly paced race, we would all just walk our races, because it's really easy to maintain a steady walk. Yeah. So the idea is like, it's a steady distribution of effort in service of hitting your limit, just as you reach the finish line. And so, if you get to, within sight of the finish line, the last mile of a marathon, the last 300 meters of a 5K, whatever it is, and you're like, all right, I don't need to hold back anymore. I'm going to let it all hang out. If you get to that point and you go to accelerate and you can't, that's a really good indication that you nailed it. Yeah. Like obviously if you're involuntarily slowing down, you didn't nail it. But if you get to that point where you just want to go full throttle and you maybe speed up by a few seconds, that's actually a really good sign, because if you're able to speed up much more than that. Now, if it's a tactical race, that's another matter. You're just trying to beat someone, and it's fine. Sit and kick, go ahead. But if you're running for time, you want to get to the point where, when you stop racing by perceived exertion and you just empty out the tank and not much happens, and everything was pretty steady up to that point, you can say you ran a perfect race or something close to it.
I guess that means the sort of Noakes central governor theory hasn't come into play and your brain hasn't slowed you down deliberately, saving some resources. Because when you take that off, there aren't any extra resources.
Yeah. I mean, I get into that, so it's like, I get into like the history of the study of pacing, and Noakes, Tim Noakes, the eminent South African medical doctor and exercise physiologist, he was the first one to study pacing, who said, hey, what about the brain? Isn't the brain? Because everyone was like, oh, maybe it's like, I don't know, it's like blood
Lactate or
yeah. And Noakes is like, no, it's probably, we have brains for a reason. It is the control center. But then, but he had his central government theory still was like, it was sort of like a mechanistic and mechanistic model that really didn't introduce consciousness. And then Samuele Marcora, the eminent Italian exercise physiologist, came along and said, all right, I get it about the brain, but what about consciousness? His idea was like, we don't need like this homunculus inside our brains, like tripping a switch when we're in danger of hurting ourselves. We just start hurting and we consciously decide to slow down.
Yeah, that's actually like I think that's where you talk about toughness and being tougher and enduring more. And
Yep.
Is that the secret? Is it maybe that I'm just not tough enough for a sub 3 hour marathon? Maybe I just need to be tougher.
I think that is unlikely. Very unlikely. I think you're as tough as you need to be. I'm not saying you can't run a sub 3 hour marathon.
It's an interesting thing that I've gotten into a misconception with respect to kind of this sort of biophysical consciousness model, because I get to the end of a marathon and I go, okay, I can't keep it up. I'm fading. And my internal reaction to that is, you're weak. You're mentally weak. The controlling factor here is your consciousness, your brain sugar, and your conscious reaction to, or your subconscious reaction to that, creating a false sense of slowing down. Ignore it, but I can't ignore it. So what do I do? Am I stuck? Is it just the same? Just having that kind of reaction, it's just the same as having no nutrients in your muscles anymore, which you have, because you still got some at that point.
Yes. I guess, I mean, in the book, it's one of the things that is in How to Run the Perfect Race that was not included in on Pace is the example of Sifan Hassan collapsing in the finishing stretch of the World Championships, 10,000 meters last year. She's like,
when she fell
like
over,
shoulder to shoulder, racing for the gold medal, and she just goes down. And I've watched that tape dozens of times, and like, there is no contact between them. I mean, there was a little bit of elbowing, but you can see she just collapses. Like, I think, I've actually gone back and forth with Samuele Marcora on this, because I believe it is possible in extremely rare circumstances to run yourself to the point where there actually is a system failure. And that's what it looks like. I think that, I think it takes an incredibly fit, incredibly motivated, incredibly tough athlete, because the only time you ever see that is in exactly those circumstances. It's an elite runner, usually in a 10,000 meter race, every now and then 5,000 meters, sometimes cross country, but all around that same thing where you're able to run at a very high intensity and then sprint. And it's always an extended sprint where you just like, all right, I'm going now, and you've got 500 meters to sprint. Like, you will see a couple of those examples, every now and then, where someone just, and it really is, I think it's like a loss of coordination, because we forget, like, running is controlled falling. That's all you're doing, is falling and catching yourself, and falling and catching yourself. And just like, there's, really, high-tech instruments that can really granularly measure like just how much coordination is going on in like, all parts of your body. Everything from your breathing being aligned with your foot strikes to agonists and antagonists, like contracting and relaxing in like just minute timing. But it's like juggling, like, when someone drops a ball, they're juggling 12. They never drop one, they drop 12. Like, as soon as you lose, the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah, it's like a Jenga, basically.
Yeah.
One block comes out, everything comes down.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah. But I think the reason I cite that example is I think in every other circumstance, when you lose speed, at the end of a race, it is voluntary. It is a choice.
Yeah.
If you're not pulling a Sifan Hassan and just ending up, I mean, you could see she was utterly bewildered, like, what happened?
Yes.
It's a choice. Doesn't feel like
So if Liz doesn't make it to the 3 hour, it's her choice. So she's choosing not to achieve. That's kind of
Mm.
the weird mental process that I end up in. So if you don't make it on this last piece of keeping the pace, if you can't sustain it, probably not going to get picked off the tarmac unconscious. You're going to get through the finish line, and you have chosen not to give enough.
Yeah, if we
That's
could
a
go a
pretty
little
hard.
further
That's a
there,
very
then.
hard bitter pill to swallow.
But I mean, let me, add one point of clarification. What color medal did Safan Hassan get in that race? None. She finished
She got
11th.
nothing. Yeah, yeah. She got
So that's
nothing.
nothing to be proud of. Like it took. I admire her toughness to just be able to run to the point of collapse, but like that was poor execution.
Oh no,
Like
she got it wrong by 10
Mm.
meters. Yeah, she got
yeah,
it wrong by 10 meters and it cost her 11 places. But
yeah,
we're getting it wrong by much more than that, and it's
yeah.
costing us quite a
But
lot.
still, I think it's important. Like you cannot. Toughness is one tool you need.
So you basically you can't tough your way to the result you
You
want.
cannot. No, you
Okay.
you have to be every bit as smart as you
Okay.
are tough. And
Okay.
being smart means like you have to err on the side of execution. This is a point that Mark Horo makes. It's like, one of Tim Noakes's arguments about why the brain was clearly involved in pacing, which sounds like duh, but like before him, no one even considered it.
Yeah.
It was the like what he called the end spurt phenomenon. It's like, most runners are able to speed up at the end. Like if the brain isn't involved, that wouldn't happen.
Something's holding you
But
back. Yeah.
yeah, but Mark Hora, the way he looks at it is like there's no central governor. Like it's all done consciously, because like when you start a race, you have a goal that seems like it's a singular thing, but it actually has two different facets that you can tease apart. So the goal is to finish in the least time possible, right? That sounds like one thing, but it's actually the goal. You can't finish in the least time possible unless you finish. So you're actually, what people are doing is like they're making sure they finish as job number one, and then they're trying to minimize completion time. So, and that's just smart. You have to do that. And you can say, oh, that's not very tough. It's very smart, like to make sure to make sure you finish, and then try to get as close to the minimum time possible. So yeah, toughness, very important. But if that's all you got, you're not going to run a perfect race.
Are there things we can do that will help?
Can we learn? Can we learn to be better pacers?
We're looking for 2% here, aren't we? We're looking for like 1.5%. We've already got the super shoes, so that's dialed in.
Yeah, need 4.5 minutes. So long.
Yeah.
It's long. It's a lot of time on a marathon.
Of course you can. Like, and everyone does. I mean, almost everyone starts off like really, really sucking, those kids in their 1K kids run, sprinting and then walking. And then they, after a little time, I mean, usually there's been studies done with kids, like, where they have them run a distance they've never run before and then come back and do it again. And they're just kids, but they get better. And from time one to time two. So yes, so you can count on getting better, but like what I'm trying to disrupt is like a lot of runners just sort of vaguely hope to get better at pacing. It's like, oh, I suck at it, and maybe I'll suck less over time. And then I'll ask like, well, what are you actually doing to get better? Well, just training. So for me, like just being intentional about it. I'm programmatically going to work on becoming a better pacer. So then it's not just improving as fast as experience accumulates. It's actually pouring lighter fluid on that process. So you get more learning, more development out of the same amount of experience. And like, that's what the book is about. There's like all kinds of different tools and tricks that you can use to get better at pacing, and they work.
Yeah, I think it's about reflecting, right? Because you mentioned in the book, it's not just about, doing the thing, but you have to reflect on it afterwards.
Yeah, that's from the philosopher of science, John Dewey, who said, we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. And that is now like an empirically validated statement, like within the endurance sports contest. So there's a study I cite in the book that followed, really fascinating study that followed elite speed skaters from the junior level up to like the elite adult level. And they looked at how they paced races And then they looked at how much they improved over time. And the ones whose race pacing dynamics moved closer and closer to resemble those of the Olympic gold medalists and the world champions improved the most over time. So what it showed is like, the people, you would think, oh yeah, you just have talent and then you nurture the talent. But what that study suggests, it was actually the best learners. Like, yeah, these were all, physically gifted individuals, but like being the best speed skater at age 14 did not guarantee you were the best at 24. And it was the people who learned the most. And then they looked at, okay, what was different about the people who learned the most? And it was like, they would analyze their races afterwards. So they wouldn't just like do it and say, oh, that could have gone better. No, they would do it and they'll go back and look at, what did I do well? And I can replicate next time. What could I do better? And I will like make have a conscious intention to do it differently next time. So I do that with the athletes I coach. It's part of what makes like, what day is today? Monday. So a lot of my athletes are just doing like a bread and butter easy run today. And you would think, oh, just check the box and move on. But I'm reviewing my athlete's execution of every single run, like not in a like hectoring schoolmarm way, but just like you can't expect to run a perfect race unless you're aiming for perfection daily in practice. So like, I get the upload, I look through it, and if there's anything I want to give them a pat on the back for in terms of their execution, I do. And sometimes it's not much at all, but they know I'm always looking. And so when they're out there, hundreds of thousands of miles away doing their thing, they're thinking about it like it matters. I need to do this intentionally and mindfully. And so it's just like, then it's not just, a random Monday easy run that you forget about. It actually becomes deliberate practice.
In chapter 6 in the book, you describe some special sort of pacing challenges, which it might be useful to just talk through a few of those in terms of, our listeners might be interested in the sort of content value of that. But just before you get into that, the whole chapter sort of starts with you describing this sort of theoretical wacky pacing challenge for a half marathon where you would have, maybe it'd be better if you explain it, because you're better explaining these things. But I was fascinated by this sort of theoretical mind model that you put together, and then you went on to describe some pacing challenges.
Yep. So, I mean, obviously, anytime you have a target pace or a target time or whatever, target heart rate, target power for a run, that is a pacing challenge. So, if you go out, tomorrow and you do, 600-meter intervals at 5K pace, that is a pacing challenge. So we're all used to that, but there are all kinds of ways where you can like you can throw twists on those formats to amplify that challenge. And it becomes more and more important to find different wrinkles to insert into workouts as people become more advanced. It's like, hey coach, I have no problem hitting 5K pace in a set of 600-meter reps, but could I still get better at pacing? I'm like, yes, you can. But we're going to have to basically, have you do things that you haven't done a million times before, to elevate that skill. So I have fun coming up. I mean, I learned some from other coaches, but I just invent some. So the one I start off is just a mind experiment that just kind of makes this point, where it would be a pacing challenge where you and a partner are running a half marathon. The partner is actually a stranger. They're hired by the race organizer. And so they start ahead of you and you just watch them, run off into the distance, and you're able to watch them and sort of gauge how fast they're running. And then a minute later or whatever, I forget what I say in the book, you're allowed to take off after them. And the goal is to catch them at the finish line, having run the most even pace possible. So it's really kind of a cognitive challenge, but also with a visual element, like being able to judge speed, to comprehend, that abstract distance. You can't see the finish line, 21.1 kilometers per way, but you understand what that distance is. So you're like, all right, my goal is to run just a hair faster than this confederate of the race director. And so if you had 100 runners do that, someone would win, and it's not about how fast you're running. It's about just how precise you're able to be in this kind of weird challenge. And my point is I mean, that's just a fact. It is not arbitrary. Like somebody would completely blow it and catch their partner after half a mile. It's like, man, I misjudged their pace. And then, so, and it wouldn't be, yeah, there'd be a little bit of flukiness involved, but it would prove who's really skillful at that sort of thing. And my point is, like, that matters. I would love to actually try that. Some scientists should actually run that study. But in terms of like stuff you can actually do, like in your training, they're just ways of like gamifying, familiar workout formats that just force you to be more engaged, like paying attention to how you feel and how you feel as it relates to the metrics and all that kind of stuff. And I give a bunch of examples in the book, and I'm always coming up with more.
Give us a couple, just a couple of quick ones from the book, if you can remember them.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. A couple that I really like are one is long accelerations, and I think a lot of runners are familiar with accelerations, which are like a variation on strides. So that's where you go from a jog to a sprint over 10 to 15 seconds, right? You're just kind of winding up. You see a lot of people do that before races. Long acceleration is where you extend that over several minutes. So you're actually accelerating continuously for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. And so obviously you only have so many gears. You have a top end, and yet you have to respect that. And you're trying to draw out the acceleration process so that you don't run out of gears before you
have to fine tune your acceleration very, very carefully.
Yeah.
And it's a cool experience. Like when you're doing, you're like, all right, like, I mean, the first time I did it, I imagined like there was this wall behind me that had been programmed to do it perfectly. So it's accelerating, at just the right pace.
It's called a wave light.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was just like, I think this was before wave lights when I,
probably.
I just imagine it's like, well, I just like it's doing it right. And all I have to do is kind of feel its pressure behind me and make sure I'm always accelerating. So that's fun.
But you're constantly accelerating, which that's the hard part, because we used to do this workout with my old team where we would have like 90 minutes and you do 30, 30, 30. So each 30 minutes, so you started at a jog, and then each 30 minutes you would increase the pace by like 15 to 30 seconds per K or something. So if you started your jog way too fast, well, then your last 30 minutes was going to just feel like death.
That's kind of the kindergarten version of what Matt's describing.
Yeah, it is, because we only had to accelerate like twice. Whereas now in your 5 minutes, you have to constantly be accelerating, but by a tiny, tiny amount.
So the twist on that one is we're very used to like shifting gears in kind of like a quantum way. So like I was running this fast, now I'm running this fast. What we're not used to is like an analog process where you take out all the stitching and it's just smooth. I mean, there's really good physiological rationales to do that. Like you do these intervals and you're hitting every intensity within a single workout. That's kind of cool. But then it really engages your mind and gets you. That's so much like if you look at the people who are just like really, really great at pacing, and that really means they're able to run their own perfect races. That's kind of what's different about them, is like they don't just have slow, medium, and fast. They can slice it so thin. And so like this type of workout helps us all get better at just slicing our perception of intensity and speed thinner. And then another one that I really like and is fun is what I call stretch intervals. And that's where like pretty standard format would be 8 or 10 times 30 seconds uphill. So hill repetitions. And what you have to do is cover slightly more distance in each rep, and with the last rep being an all-out effort. And so the idea is like you're trying to leave just enough room. So let's say it's like 8 times 30 seconds. You run that first rep. You can't game the system by walking it, so you have plenty of room to increase your speed. Like it's a good honest effort, but you're trying to leave just enough room to cover a bit more distance in each of 7 subsequent intervals. So you just like drop a marker when you finish that first 30-second rep, go back down to your starting point, do number 2, drop a second marker, pick up the first, and that's a lot of fun. I use it a lot here at Dream Run Camp with athletes.
If you get those things wrong, you probably pay pretty severely for them. See Matt, listeners can't see Matt grinning like some evil devil coach.
Yeah. It's yeah, it is. It can be hard to watch at times.
And so you talk a lot about experience. So what about people that are more at the beginning of their running journey? Like, do all of these things benefit them, or do they need to first get the experience and then start to do all these like pacing games and all those kinds of things?
Yeah, I think different tools are appropriate for different stages in the process. I would say that like beginners are kind of at an advantage in one respect. Like, no, they don't have the experience yet, but a lot of what I'm doing with more experienced athletes is getting them to unlearn bad habits. Like,
Okay.
once that device dependency is ingrained, it can be hard to kind of deprogram the athlete. Whereas like a beginner, I can start them off doing things like running without their watch, or running, you just put it on, elapsed time, and then you're just like.
I have to say that even for beginners, that's a really hard sell. But maybe you're catching them more beginner than the beginners that I've coached. But usually when they are ready to be coached, they've already started running with devices. It's hard to sell the benefits of letting go of those devices a little bit. So
Yeah, that's true. I agree with that. It's hard to sell it. That doesn't mean it isn't beneficial.
Yeah.
And that is a very appropriate tool for anyone, but it's like very helpful for a beginner who hasn't yet become too device dependent. And you can do another one I will do is like, I just had an athlete do it today, as a matter of fact, what I call like blinded fartleks. And that for her, I said, I want you to do, like, it was like a 4-mile easy run with 6 times 40 seconds at like a certain target pace thrown in. But she wasn't allowed to look at her watch either for the time or for the pace. So it was like, okay, go. And then just when you think it's been 45 seconds, dial back. And so you're just, trying to see how well you can, guess a pace and an elapsed duration just by feel.
Hang on.
Oh, that's interesting.
Surely you've got to wear your watch though, otherwise you won't know.
Yeah. Yeah, for that one, you are
Okay.
wearing it. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
You could put
like,
some masking tape on it.
You'll wear it upside down or something on the underside of your
you
wrist.
just like, no, you
No,
just
in your pocket.
people look at it if it's
You're overthinking it.
worn upside down. You need masking tape. You put some painter's tape over
No,
the.
you don't do that.
Here's how you do it.
Okay.
You hit the lap button. You hit the lap button without looking at the watch. It's actually quite easy. Like, it's like when you're ready to start, hit the lap button. When you think 45 seconds have passed, hit the lap button again, and you can see your result immediately without cheating. So yeah, pretty easy.
Ah, okay. So you get to see your result like when you think it's been.
See each result
Okay,
as you
okay.
generate it, which you can then put into your thinking for the next interval.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the idea.
That's cool.
Ah, okay. Yeah, because Alan and I tried to play this game was it last year
I think we told Matt about this on
pace. Yeah, we were trying to guess after reading On Pace. We were trying to guess so we would have our lap timer on for every K, and during our long runs we would try and guess what the lap timer time was when it beeped before we looked at it. So many times I would look at it and then I'd be like, Alan, I can't tell you because now I know I looked at it by accident.
Yeah, it's kind of programmed into your into your muscle memory to just lift your wrist up and look at your watch. You don't realize. So it's buzzing, and we're supposed to declare before we look.
Yep.
And Liz is looking before she declares. Okay.
Yeah.
We forgive you. So who are there role models for pacing? Who are the guys? I think you describe very nicely Kenenisa Bekele's 2019 almost world record marathon run, misses by 2 seconds or something. As being almost one of the epitomes of pacing. Is he the man? Who are the examples?
I mean, at that level, there are so many. I mean, like, at the very point end of the spear, nobody sucks at pacing. Now, if you take like, let's say the Hoka NAZ Elite professional running team that's here in town, they got 20 athletes. Are they all exactly equally good at pacing? No, but the worst of them is very, very good at it.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can just take your pick. The standard is very, very high. There's that, can't remember if it's in the book. I think it is, but it's a quote I love from Michael Crowley's book, Out of Thin Air. Have you had him on the show?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have, yeah.
But
Good
he's
book.
quoting Coach Meseret. He's only ever identified as Coach Meseret. I don't know his full name, but he said, he was explaining like how he does like, group track sessions. And he said, like, if I tell the group to run 66 seconds for a lap and the person leading it runs 65, they get a yellow card. And if they run 64, they get a red card and they can't lead again. And that sounds like incredibly draconian and hard ass, right? But how often do you think they're 2 seconds off? Not very often.
Wow.
Yeah. So
That's incredible.
It's doable. And you remember the old Tiger Woods Nike ad when he's juggling a ball on
a golf ball on the stick.
Then he just hits it out of the air. It's like, wow, that's incredible. And it is like it's a very skillful demonstration. It's not golf, you know what I mean? Like that's not golf. But do you think someone who can do that is also pretty good at regular golf?
Yeah.
Yes. And so like that's the thing that runners, we tend to underestimate just how similar our skills are to like every sport. The essence of every single sport is control of the body in space. What Tiger Woods being able to just hit amazing chip shots and juggle golf balls, that's control of the body in space. So is pacing. And so like if you're really good at executing on what your coach asks you to do, that's not just a neat party trick. Like that directly feeds into your ability to run a perfect race.
Yeah, and I guess a message for anybody who's a beginner and thinks, do I really need this? I have a Garmin watch. Do I really need to be able to control my pace? You just said it. Everybody who's at an elite level, who's an elite level runner, can do this much better, plus or minus, but can do this very, very well. That's not a coincidence. There's probably nobody at a pro level who sucks at pacing.
Yeah, and the thing I would add to that, because I don't want to be accused of elitism. For me, like this focus on pacing is actually a way to democratize the sport, because you can't do anything about your genetic makeup, right? For me, I would love to have run a sub 220 marathon, didn't have the genes for it, but like anyone, in theory can, it's like, how much potential do you have? And then how much of your potential do you fulfill? Can't do much about potential, but everyone can go for 100% of fulfillment. And that is so satisfying.
It absolutely is. I mean, we're on this sub 3 hour kick. To some extent, it's wonderful when you step back from it and look at it, because what we're trying to do is trying to squeeze the last drop out of the lemon, basically. Yeah, which is fantastic. It's so wonderful to be able to do that, and we need to keep reminding ourselves when the training gets hard.
Lose perspective.
So on that note, how about we talk about macro pacing? Because you talk about it in your book, and like, should all runners worry about macro pacing? So first of all, what is macro pacing? Why is it important?
First of all, I don't think runners should worry about anything. You never should worry. Sometimes you do.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Should
But
you
yeah,
be
whenever a runner
preoccupied?
asks me, like, Coach, should I be worried? And it's like, you should never be worried. You might have a reason to be worried, but there's no should. But yeah, macro pacing. This is something I started to learn about.
Self-talk lessons from Coach Matt.
Right. There is no should. There is only Yoda here.
There is no try.
Macro pacing. Yeah. So, if you say pacing to a runner, they immediately think of the goal directed distribution of effort across an exercise bout. Like that's the scientific. So it's micro. It's like one run. You pace a run. But there's also another pacing that has a much broader time scale. I started to learn more about it after I developed long COVID, which is like a chronic fatigue type of illness. And, one of the most effective treatments for these post-viral chronic fatigue scenarios is pacing, which just means like not doing too much really, and like just figuring out how much can you do, how much time do you need to allow to do, to do it compared to, when you're healthy, you take all this stuff for granted. You're still pacing, right? It's all you've ever known. But like when your limits are affected, you have to you realize, oh, wow, pacing in life is actually really important. So it is for runners also on a macro scale. Like, for me, it's better. I mean, who wants to have just one perfect race when you can have 50 over a long period of time? Like I most admire the elite athletes. I most admire is not just the ones who reach the top, but the ones who stay there for a long time. And they just sort of like, and that again is something that can be done at every level. You just sort of like extend your prime. And if you study these athletes, athletes like Abdi Abdirahman, who qualified for 5 Olympic teams for the US, Sarah Hall, who ran her first marathon at like 34, and I think PR'd in her first 10 marathons. Like these athletes who they reach the mountaintop and then they just build a nest. They're like,
there.
Yeah. And you find when you study these athletes, they have a lot of things in common. So it's clearly there's like a formula, for being able to, extend your prime. And, I think that's desirable for I mean, there are the bucket listers out there, but most of us would like to just, get good and then stay good. So that's macro pacing.
Yeah, we've spoken with Abdirahman. He wrote a book, and we spoke with him, and he got on the podcast a little late, and we said, "Oh, you okay?" He says, "Yeah, just woke up from a nap." Says, "Have to have a nap every day," and you go, "That's my man. That's my man."
Yeah.
Like just extending your ability by treating it like a precious commodity, taking your midday nap.
Yeah, in the book, he actually talks about just, I guess, the big difference between when he was training to make the Olympics and then in between, because, he would there was a big difference, which I think like most of us don't really have in a year, or let's say if you take like a 2, 3, I guess he was doing 4-year cycles because the Olympics are every 4 years. But, for us, even I guess for him in a yearly cycle, like Eliud Kipchoge, I think he takes something like a month off. Like he doesn't run for a month after he does his goal marathon, and he starts back from scratch later. But then when he's training really hard, I mean, he's running, how many kilometers per week. And so there's this big difference between the lowest point and the highest point in the year. And I think most of us don't have that.
Yeah, that sort of that ability to it's a kind of balance, really. If running is your highest priority all the time, your peaks are not going to be as high as if you sometimes just, you don't take running off the stove, but you do slide it back to the, back burner and keep it on low. And then you just return to it. When you're ready to make it your highest priority again, you're energized, your physiological battery is recharged, and you can attain higher peaks that way.
I mean, I guess it's also good for life because also, if you want to maintain relationships, like you need time for that. And if you want to, put energy into like a work project or something, then, you need time for that as well. So if you're always training 15 hours a week, then there are a lot of things that suffer, including, house cleanliness and like home cooked meals. There's this great meme on Instagram that I saw the other day. It said, "Marathon training is not hard. Doing everything else while you're marathon training, that's the hard part."
Yeah,
it's certainly a full-time job, it seems to be.
Yeah.
One of the things you do say about pacing and a potential problem with pacing is fixating yourself on a time goal. This resonated strongly with me because we're fixated on a time goal. And it occurs to me, is it realistic for us? I guess we've got to make that evaluation, do we? At the end of the day, races, if you want to do a race, you want to optimize a race, you're trying to optimize the time. So you tend to fixate on the time goal that you're aiming for or that you're aspiring to. And of course, then maybe you try to pace based on that time goal versus something else. What's the something else?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the goal is never truly to achieve the goal. The goal just sets you up to find your limit. Your limit's unknowable, right? And so it's not like, oh, I want to run 3 hours because God came to me in a dream and he said, like, that is your ultimate limit. I'm God, I know. So like you can take that to the bank. Now go out and do it. Like that's not where that goal comes from. It's just like a guess, it's a round number, it's makes you feel good, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You're joining a certain club. Those are the
Yeah.
reasons. And
And
so
you've run a 10K in this time, and you've run a
right.
half marathon in this
Right.
time. And these gurus like Matt, who produce tables, say that that should translate into a 3 hour marathon, and that's a nice round number. So why not?
Mm-hmm.
But that number may or may not represent your absolute limit. And if it does, it's on a particular day. So the goal for me is always it's just how you execute. Like, do you look back on the journey and say that was the best I could do? I mean, there was one time when I was I ran like a 4-minute PR in a half marathon. After I was like stuck in the 117s forever. I'm like, I know I'm better than this. And so like I ran a half marathon with the goal again was to get into the 116s, and I ran 113 something. And
Wow.
like every now and then that happens, right? You just like blow away your expectations. Well,
Mm-hmm.
guess what? If you're fixated on a goal, you can't really do that.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? It's just like I got out there. I'm like, something is different about my legs today. I'm going for it. And then of course there were a lot more occasions when the goal was to, for a long time for me, it was like a 2:39 marathon. And I would get out there and I'd be like, not happening today, not happening today. And I learned to take satisfaction and like, finishing the race and knowing like that wasn't 2:39, but it really was the best I could possibly do today. Like it is just a deeper satisfaction. And I'll prove it to you. Like, because like I know it's been a saga for you to chasing the sub 3, but what if you'd done it in your first attempt? Would you still be chasing 3 hours?
No, I guess I wouldn't.
No,
No.
no, you wouldn't. So that means the number is meaningless. The number doesn't mean anything at all. Like you forget that. Like you achieve it and you're like, that's yesterday's news. And so that proves what I'm saying is true. It's just an excuse to stretch you and help you discover what you're capable of. There was a study that was done. I don't know if I mentioned it in the book. I hope I did. But a study where they looked at these were like high level runners and the goals that they took into races, and then how they modified or did not modify those goals like as they executed the race. And they found that the runners who they didn't have a death grip on the goal, but they were more flexible. They would either go faster or they would change the goal in the middle of the race is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Like they tended to actually perform better than the ones who are just like, nope, this is the goal, I'm going to do it hell or high water. And so you would think, oh man, you're changing the goal, you're wimping out. It's like, no, like I'm just smart. Like I know I can't run that number to that day. And that goal was never the goal. The goal was to do the best I can. So that means modifying it in a smart way on the fly and seeing what I got.
Yeah. A very interesting thing, and I think we raised it last time, but I'll do it again because it was so interesting, is that you say, if I could visit you while you were running and say to you, can you hold this pace to the end? That your answer shouldn't be, oh, yes, I can, or no, I can't, but I'm not sure, or maybe. Yeah. And I guess that kind of implies that you're right on the edge.
Mm-hmm. Yes, maybe is the correct answer.
Mm-hmm. That's the only time maybe is the correct answer. Most people hate that answer. You should not answer maybe to a question. People will hate you. So I guess let's just talk little bit about the last section of the book. So you do have some plans in there. And I think those plans were also in on pace because there were I remember the levels, like you have 0, 1, and 2, I think, for each one, and you have 5K, 10K, half marathon, and marathon plans. Let's say somebody is just starting out and they got to the point where they can now like run a 5K. Would an RPE based training plan be a good next step for them, or should they have more running base or more running experience before they start that?
No, I mean, I'm a big fan of RPE is like, a 1 to 10 or 6 to 20 scale of like how hard you're working. Sometimes it's hard to put numbers on something that is really not a number, it's an experience. So, for me with my one-on-one coaching, sometimes I will use those scales. Sometimes I'll use actually language, just, but the idea is like, it's not a performance metric, like pace or power or whatever. Like you're going by feel in some way or another. So, I mean, that should start on day one, and you should never, I mean, I think for the 80% of training you should be doing at low intensity, that should always be perception based. Like you have like a ceiling, right? Like, my VT1 is, 840 per mile. So I'm never running faster than 840 per mile in an easy run. But other than that, it's like, all right, well, how much slower than that do I run then? And the answer is you do it by feel, because you feel a little different every day. And if you learn to tune in to how you're feeling, I have a blog post I wrote a while back that I reference all the time, why your easy run pace should be wildly erratic. Because like that is the best way to fine tune your training. So as you go, so you don't have to make big decisions. So if you go out to do an easy run and it's just not easy, just go ahead and slow down, like as much as you need to slow down to make it basically comfortable. And then if you're in a purple patch and you just feel great in an easy run, even the day after like a brutal interval workout, well, go ahead. You got some pep in your step, and it feels comfortable to run faster. And if you're kind of tuned into your body and you trust it, and you're going to have to make fewer, structural changes to your plan, and you're going to do a better job. You're trying to get the most out of each and every day. And like just being, going by feel is hugely important in that. Now there are other sessions, more of like, the quality work where you do want to lean a little bit more on the numbers. And so yeah, I mean, this is not RPE based training is not for advanced runners. It's for runners, but it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can mix the two together.
Yeah, which I noticed in the plans, it's a mix, because at the beginning it's like they're mostly RPE, and then
Yep.
you get to like sort of more workouts that have some pace
Yep.
in them. Yeah.
Yep. Different tools for different jobs.
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, the race is measured in terms of time. So you need
Yes.
some time-based.
At some point, you need to be
yeah.
paying attention to the clock. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, if anybody wants to get a copy of this book, where's the best place? Is Amazon fine, or do you want to direct them somewhere in particular?
Yep. Yeah. Amazon is fine. Wherever you normally get your books, you'll be able to get this one as well. And there is an audio edition if you're an audio book consumer.
Narrated by yourself?
Nope. I did that once and I'll never do it again.
Oh, really?
Okay.
It's a tough job, is it?
Yes, it was really hard.
Okay, so what are you up to?
I guess what I should say is I'm sort of aware of dream camps. So maybe
Yep.
you could tell us a bit about dream camps. And I'm also aware of two other books that I've heard mentioned, in addition to the one you mentioned at the start of our chat. That's The Other Talent. And I've heard you talk about Dying to Run, which I think is around your long-term COVID.
Yep.
Tell us about those things and all the other things that you're probably up to.
Yeah, I'm pretty immersed in Dream Run Camp. It's like a year-round fantasy retreat for runners of all abilities in the running mecca of Flagstaff, Arizona. So it's kind of like a rolling attendance residential format, kind of modeled after like a professional running or training camp. So you come here, hang out in a house that's just filled with runner-specific amenities. Minimum stay is a week. You can stay for up to 12 weeks. Right now, I have someone who's going to be here for 8 weeks and another person who's going to be here for 12, 10
That
and a
sounds
half.
amazing.
Yeah. So you get to just like make your entire life revolve around running for a period of time. You get me as your coach. There's like a lot, we have massage therapist, dietitian, mental skills coach, physiotherapist, strength coach. And yeah, it's really an awesome thing, but it's new. And I've been kind of a one-man show up to this point. So like it's nonstop for me. It's very busy right now. I'm loving it, but it's hard and it's all consuming.
I guess it kind of makes me think about a reflection on your experience with Matt Liano
Yep.
in the book that you wrote, Running the Dream.
Yep.
So you're basically reenacting that for everyone else.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm like, I can't hog this experience to myself. Like
Yeah.
other people need to be able to partake. So yeah, I
Okay.
got to be a fake pro runner for a summer in 2017, and now I'm offering that opportunity to others.
That's pretty cool. When
Mhm.
our podcast becomes wildly successful and the money just flows in
Mhm.
based on our podcast, which will probably never happen, we'll be signing up at your dream camp.
It's
Hmm.
not that expensive.
We
It's
might
not.
be signing up anyway. So
Yeah, maybe that's the
yeah,
thing to do.
yeah,
Yeah.
not this year, but we might be signing up anyway.
Yep. Come
Yeah,
on.
I
Come
did
on.
look at it on the website actually. It looks pretty
Yeah.
affordable
It is.
compared to the alternatives.
Yeah, my
Mhm.
husband was pretty excited when he looked it all up, and
Mhm.
we were
Yeah. Okay,
thinking
so
about it.
that's Dream Camp, which is sucking up all your time.
Yeah.
What's this book, The Other Talent?
The other talent is kind of a deep dive into the relationship between mental health and athletic greatness. It's often remarked, it's not politically correct, but I mean, this often comes from elite athletes themselves, that you have to be a little crazy to be a great athlete. And I
Yeah.
just sort of looked into that. There's a lot of attention, and it's a good thing, on the kind of special mental health challenges that elite athletes face. I'm actually looking at it
Mm,
the other way around. It's like, what sort of like mental health status do these folks have before they become great, and like, is it part of actually the formula? Like, is it
okay.
true,
Do you have to
when
have
somebody
it?
says you have to be a little
Yeah.
crazy?
Yeah.
So yeah, just
Certainly, I've watched the Netflix series Sprint. Have you seen
yep.
that?
No,
And
I haven't. Yeah.
some of the sprinters, you know, they look like they're wired up differently
Yeah.
to you
Yeah.
and I.
Mhm.
But I don't know. Okay, there was a book in the predicted future about your progress with or your experience with long-term COVID.
Yes. Dying to Run has been my working title for it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wanted to have some kind of comeback to make the story. So I signed up for the Javelina 100K trail race here in Arizona. It's in October. And at the time, so I signed up for it on New Year's Eve. And I wasn't running at all, wasn't able to run. And I just thought, I'll just take a moonshot and see if I can figure it out. And yeah, I wanted to just document the experience. So it's sort of about, it's really for me, it's my story, but I also wanted it to be a way for all of us to kind of process the trauma that we
Mhm.
collectively, like, for
Hmm.
me, yeah, I got sick and never got better. 2020 was just a bad year for pretty much everyone on the planet. I thought this, the right book could be, people could see their experience in my experience, and that it would be kind of healing for everyone. So yeah, my training was going reasonably well. I was able to do things I thought I would never do again, but then the bottom dropped out, and now I can't run again, and that's just how it's been. So this will happen. It's not looking good for Javelina, but I tend to finish what I start, so
There
we'll
will
get
be a
there.
book.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And where can people follow you so that they know when this book is going to come out?
My personal website is mattfitzgerald.org. You can learn more about Dream Run Camp at dreamruncamp.com.
Why don't you reset your goals for some smaller steps towards 100, like a 10K or a half marathon or
Had to be 100K, because like the longest race I ever finished was longest running race I ever finished was 50 miles. I DNF'd the 100K I ever ran. So
Oh,
the idea was
there's
like,
meaning behind it.
yeah, this wasn't me like Matt, coming back and then being the athlete he was before. Like, this was me getting closure. So it was one race,
Mhm.
and it had to be that distance. And
Okay.
yep.
Okay.
Okay, as obsessives with arbitrary fixed goals for kind of arbitrary-ish reasons, we can't deny that.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
completely understand.
Yeah, we all think the same.
Yeah, we do. That's why it makes such a great bunch. We all understand each other.
We certainly hope that any setback you're having is like a blip, even if it's a big blip, a blip
Yep.
on the road, and you get it back together.
Thank you. I'm not complaining, by the way. My life is great. It just, my health isn't great, but everything else
Yeah.
is.
I see you applying all of the teachings that you gave us in the comeback quotient. And go, I know what
Walk the
he's
talk.
I know what he's doing there. but
Yeah.
he darn wants to run.
Yeah.
Yeah, he really wants to run. So I hope that comes to you.
Right on. Appreciate it.
Wow, thanks for your time, Matt. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to talking to you next week on the Matt Fitzgerald podcast,
Right. Yeah.
which we're renaming our running book reviews podcast.
Yeah. Then the sponsor money will come flowing in.
There we go. There we go. Strategy.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
Always.
thanks ever so much, and all the best.
I know.
Bye.
So, do you want to do the summary? You want to have first go at the summary for a change?
So, of course, we read On Pace, which talked about the importance of pacing, but this book was a good reminder for us. So, if you haven't read On Pace, then I would say go for the second edition. If you have On Pace at home, you can actually reread On Pace, and you know, a lot of the things we talk about are in there. One takeaway that I got from this read was the idea that it's not really experience that helps us learn pacing, but to reflect on the experience. I actually don't remember if I had read that in On Pace, but that sort of idea was just like this aha moment. It's like, well, maybe I'm missing that because, what I tend to do a lot is in a race, like if a race goes bad, I try really hard to forget about it.
Yeah, just
And
put it in a box and close the lid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have this rule. So I say like, okay, I'm allowed to give myself like 1 week of pity party, especially if it's a marathon. It deserves an entire week of pity party. And then it's like I have to move on. And I think that it's kind of a common thing that we're always told is like we just have to move on from things that happen. But actually, sometimes we have to, process them more than that before we move on. Obviously, eventually you have to move on. But yeah, so I think this was sort of like an aha moment. And one of those things that I should probably put a post-it note on my fridge so that I remember for after this marathon, so that I actually take the time to reflect regardless of how it goes, if it's a good result or bad day or whatever happens. Although the plans in the second half of the book start off as mostly RPE based, there are workouts that are done at pace, which will reassure a lot of runners. So like me, I remember trying to train by effort, which when I was doing that with my previous coach, it was more like he would say, run at 5K effort. And it was mostly because we were running either cross country or we were running in the winter time when the footing wasn't good. And he would always say, don't worry about the pace, just run the effort. So when you have a mix of the two, at least sometimes you do get some of the pace, which is reassuring for people like me. So if you have any doubts about the training plans, I say, yeah, you shouldn't, just because they do have a nice mix of when you running specific paces that you need in your race. The general layout and flow of information is good, as usual, with all of Matt's books. So there's a good mix of science and stories to demonstrate all the key ideas. So overall, a good read.
Basically, you've said it all, Liz. So I've got nothing much. That's usually what you said, aren't you?
Oh, well, that's it
Okay.
from Running Book Reviews.
Bye.
Bye.
Hold on, my summary. As an older runner, the book provides me with a reminder of some of the good old things that were good about running and pacing before devices and apps came into play. I'm actually a runner who started running when all you had was a watch that told you how much time had elapsed.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that was a good thing as it happens, because you learn more things about feeling the pace. Matt's book focuses on some items, and I'll list them here. Improved body awareness, judgment, and toughness. And these are not normally the focal points in running books necessarily. So it sort of provides a unique approach. And I think as he's told us, pacing improvement is basically seconds left on the table for everybody. So if you think you're not doing perfect pacing, you're leaving some seconds on the table. And by improving that, you can get those seconds back. And therefore, for everybody, it's a skill worth cultivating. So if you're listening to this and going, oh, I'm not sure whether that's for me, I think it's for everybody. The layout of the book's great. It's very readable and well laid out. I was a bit sad that on pace we had Yuki in the 2018 Boston Marathon on the cover, which I thought was a great story. I'm biased because I did the 2018 Boston Marathon, as everybody knows, because I mention it every time we're on a podcast almost. So I'm a bit sad that he's no longer on the cover. But apart from that, it's kind of a new and improved edition. It's got more substance to it, better introduction. For me, it was fantastic to go through all the pacing stuff for a second time.
I agree with that.
That's it.
Okay. Big thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. Big thanks to the publisher 80/20 Publishing for providing review copies of the book. And another big thanks to Matt for spending time with us today. If you'd like to leave us feedback about how we can improve the podcast or want to suggest a book that you'd like for us to review in a future episode, you can leave us a comment on social media. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter, we are reviews_running. Please also follow us on social media to find out about new episodes when they're released, or you can subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform. I guess kind of new is we are also on Threads. For the people that prefer to email us, you can send us an email about a book that you want us to review, and our email address is runningbookraviews@gmail.com. So that's another way to reach out to us. Or you can use in the podcast app that you're using. Now there's this feature where you can text your podcast hosts. We can't answer those texts, but we do get them. If you've been listening for a while and are wondering how you can help us out, then there are a few ways. So if you're enjoying the podcast, you can spread the word, tell your friends, share a link to your favorite episode with your running partner. Heck, you can listen to an episode while you're driving to your next running event with all your running buddies in the car.
We may have done that.
We may have done that, yeah. Shameless self-promotion. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. If that's how you listen to your podcast, you can rate us on Spotify out of 5 stars. They don't have a review section, but you can give us a rating. And we're on Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy us a coffee, or you can just go follow us on Buy Me a Coffee. And if we ever have any extras, like we were recently on another podcast, so we'll usually post links up there. So normally if we post a link and you're a follower, then it sends you an email to let you know that there's something new. And that's it for now.
Bye.
Bye.